Greetings to everyone. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Kenneth Russell Valpey. He is scholar of Vaishnava theology, preacher, translator of Vedic text and Sanskrit, and author of more than 20 books. He's not just academic, but he's a practitioner of Vedic Bhakti school since 1972. In 2014, he accepted sannyasa, the renounced order of life, as a monk by a name, His Holiness Krishna-Kshetra Swami. As a spiritual master, he traveled throughout the world and inspire and teach and help a lot of people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Today we will talk about your books, because there are many of them, more than 20. And I will open this conversation with on which book you are working now.
Now I'm working on a book called Yoga and Animal Ethics. It's going to be what we would call an academic book. It's concerned with the ethical understanding, the concern with how we human beings should relate with animals. And I want to bring the yoga tradition or traditions of India into the, you can say, the conversation, the debates that go on the subject of animal ethics.
I got one question on this topic from your disciple. Why you go so much into this of animal protection? And there is also a book, Cow Protection.
Mm-hmm. A book which I wrote.
Yes.
Yes. That book is, you can say, the precursor to the book I'm writing now. It's called Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics. Both books are part of a book series on the subject of animal ethics. And why I'm writing about this subject, about animals, what do we care about animals, I would say much of our trouble in contemporary society is related directly or indirectly with our treatment, or I would like to say mistreatment, of animals. And I think our modern civilization has a major blind spot in thinking how, or not thinking, how we relate with animals. It's said to have been said by the 19th century Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy, that as long as there are slaughterhouses, so long there will be slaughter on the battlefields of humans fighting and killing other human beings. So if there's any truth to that, then we might ask ourselves, how can we, could we live without slaughtering animals? Could we be happy without slaughtering animals? Could we have a diet which is free from the flesh of animals? And of course, many people have written on this subject. There's now many books, and there's a lot of increasing acceptance of vegetarianism, of now more and more veganism. So it's gone, in some sense, the subject has gone somewhat mainstream. So I want to add to that discussion from, let's say, from Eastern perspectives, from ancient India and the later Indian philosophical, theological traditions.
Amazing. When we setting all this for recording this conversation, you said that you work on Paravidyamala second part.
Yes.
We have here the first part. It looks like that. And if you can tell us more about...
what is this particular book?
Yes.
Well, Paravidya means higher knowledge. Aparavidya would mean lower knowledge. So in the Vedic or ancient Indian tradition, it's understood there's kind of two grades of knowledge. Aparavidya would be any kind of knowledge that is about temporary things, temporary life, knowledge which is of temporal value. And Paravidya is the opposite of that. It's something about enduring knowledge. So we may want to say it's about wisdom, spiritual wisdom. And the word mala means a series. So this is volume 1, and we're about to publish volume 2. So then we have at least a two-part series. And these are collections, really, of assorted things that I've either written or spoken. Some of it, probably a lot of it, is going to be just transcriptions of things which I have given as lectures and seminars. But in the first part of this Paravidyamala, as I remember, is something that I wrote, and it's a summary of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a very important, we would say, scripture of ancient India. Some would say it's the Indian Bible. It's the instruction or advice of Lord Krishna to his friend Arjuna. And it consists of 700 Sanskrit verses, or shlokas, they're called, stanzas. And it's 18 chapters. So what I've done in this summary is to take each of the 18 chapters and made a brief summary focusing on the idea of yoga, which is in each of the chapters. So it's called the 18 yogas of the Bhagavad Gita. What else is in this volume? I would need to look myself. One is a discussion about Arjuna. There's an interesting book which inspired me to give a short seminar on the character of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And yeah, other assorted seminars and discussions that I've given. Also, there's including a section on the different forms of Krishna, or what we like to call the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna, or God, we understand, expands, being all-powerful. He can expand himself into multiple forms, and each of these forms have specific functions or purposes, and they are responding to, or they are reciprocating with specific desires of the Lord's devotees. So there's quite a detailed analysis of that in this book.
So amazing. And where can someone order?
Where can someone order these books?
Yes.
That's a good question. I'm not much of a promoter of my books, but I believe one place they can be ordered is from Bhaktivedanta Library Services, which is based in Belgium, and they have a website, blservices.com, as I remember.
And they can write a comment, and we will arrange that they will get the books.
Yes.
Great. Okay, let's see what we have next here. This is the newest.
Yes,
book.
actually, this is hot off the press, we say in English.
Yes.
The paper is still warm.
Yeah, I can feel it. Krishna's Wonderful Forum, a guide for the perplexed.
Yes.
I read this book, and it is conversation between you and two students.
Three students. Two students and one former student, yes.
So can you tell us more about this book?
Okay, the title again is Krishna's Wonderful Form, a Guide for the Perplexed. And the idea is to explain in the clearest and simplest possible ways what it is in the practice of what we call bhakti yoga. What is this practice of serving forms of God in temples? What is this all about? And how is it that we would be mistaken to think of this as what is called idolatry in the Abrahamic religious traditions? Because there's very strong statements against the worship of what are called idols or physical images. We find in the sacred literature of Judaism and Christianity and Islam. So why is it that to worship Krishna in the temple is not that? That's what I'm trying to explain in the first part of this book, and then in the second part I'm explaining how there are different forms of this murti, as he's called, the physical form, different forms to be found in the temple. And then in the last part, I explain briefly just what it is that is going on. If you would go into a Krishna temple, you would see these forms on altars, nicely decorated with lots of flowers, probably, and so on. And you would see what we might call priests, and they would be doing certain things, and you might be wondering, what are they doing? So I'm explaining what's happening there and showing that it's not all so mysterious, and it's something which is quite reasonable and which can be an aid to our practice of spiritual cultivating our spiritual, higher, awakened self.
You were also a pujari. Pujari,
that's the word I was going around to say. Priest, yes.
Okay.
Pujari is one who engages in this kind of practice of what is also called seva. Sometimes puja, sometimes called seva, sometimes called archana. Different terms are there. Yeah.
There are so many books, more than 20. Do you use any specific strategy how to write?
A strategy of writing?
Yes.
Well, as I mentioned, some of these, especially like Paravidya Mala and a couple of others you have here, these are transcriptions of seminars. So it's not what I would call serious writing because it's from speaking in an extempore sort of a way, which, you know, you edit them to make it more readable. But as for strategies for writing, there's an idea, let's see how we can develop it, how we can expand it. What is the argument that I want to make? The basic format of any such writing, not fictional writing, it's more non-fictional, and it's expository, I guess we would say, is the basic format is some people say X, Y, or Z, but I say A, B, and C. But it can also be in variations of that. Some people say X, Y, and Z, and those are really good points, and I want to elaborate especially on X to be able to understand it more deeply or something like that, because many people misunderstand X, so this is how we can better understand it. Yeah, that's on the side of the reasoning and argument side, and the rest of it is about taking the time and sitting down and doing the work and kind of putting other things to the side. And it means sometimes doing such radical things like turning off one's telephone, one's mobile phone, and yeah, making a schedule, making plans. How am I going to give time for this work? And it's about a certain amount of determination and a certain amount of persistence and a certain amount of patience, I suppose, and a certain amount of enthusiasm. This will be a good thing. This will help others. Yeah, so no big secrets, I would say.
As a writer, this is really interesting to me. And the man who you don't see, but it is here, encouraged me also to share how I write a book.
How you write?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Because I don't write, I record books.
You speak them.
I speak them.
Okay.
Yes, because if I write 10 sentences, then I will 8 sentences delete. That's my nature. But if I record and just leave it, then there is. So this is somehow simple way for me to write.
Yes. Whatever works.
Yes. So let's go on with a new book. This is also fresh, not so old.
Yeah.
Yama, Niyama. What can you tell us more about this book?
You can read the subtitle. It's important for the book.
Yes. Essential steps in classical yoga applied to culture of bhakti.
Yes. So what is often called classical yoga is sometimes equated with Ashtanga yoga. Ashta means 8, Anga means limbs. the 8 limbs of yoga, which is mentioned in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is dated anywhere from 2nd century of the Common Era to, 4th century. There's debates. It's a fairly ancient work, and it's become established as a rather standard work of classical yoga, whether or not anyone can understand it or follow it. But within Ashtanga, the 8 angas, what most people are familiar with is the 3rd of the 8 angas, namely asana. And most of the yoga studios are teaching asana. I won't go into that, but what they're neglecting is all the other angas. And in particular, they're neglecting the first 2. And the first of these is called yama, which means, or it can also be with a long A, yama. The yamas are restraints, and there are specified by Patanjali in this system 5 practices of restraint. And these are sometimes called ethical principles because they have to do with how we relate with other persons. And the first of the 5 yamas is ahimsa. And ahimsa means, usually it's translated as non-injury or non-violence. And so it's understood, you want to be successful in the practice of yoga, step 1, practice non-violence, practice non-injury, cultivate a way of life in which your actions, your physical actions, your words, and your mind are restrained from the tendency to injure other beings. And then there's more restraints. There's satyam, truthfulness. We have a tendency to lie, to not tell truth. Asteya, to not steal, because we all have tendencies to take what doesn't belong to us. Brahmacharya, which means, it can be translated as celibacy, but we could also say more broadly, respecting sexual boundaries. And even more broadly, it can mean engaging with or living in spirit, Brahman. And then there's aparigraha, the final of the 5. I won't give a whole seminar on this, which is non-possessiveness, which kind of is complementary to non-stealing. But all of these together is step 1 in the practice of yoga. And then niyama, in a sense, expands on those, but it's more positive practices. Also, there are 5 of them, according to the Yoga Sutras. So all I'm doing in this book is saying, here's some nice principles, which are, if you look carefully in the bhakti devotional yoga literature, you'll find all of these principles. So let's give a little extra attention to them. And since they're considered preliminary in the classical yoga system, maybe it's helpful if we also see them as preliminary to the bhakti yoga system. That's what we're doing in that seminar. This was a seminar over some days, I think.
And how you make it to write so that it's so practical, applicable?
Applicable?
Yes. Yes.
Well, again, I didn't write, I spoke. And it's like you said, you speak your books. So in this case, I did the same.
Okay.
How to make it practical? Well, that's one nice thing about giving a seminar is you're with real people speaking, and they are asking you such questions like that. Okay, you talked a bunch of theory. Tell us something practical. So you feel impelled. Okay, I have to make this practical through examples, through one's own experience, through experience of others, through encouraging experimenting in one's own life, and just, I would say, by becoming aware, conscious, explicitly conscious. Okay, there are these principles. Let me keep them somewhere in the on the front stage, in the foreground of my consciousness, so I can, as we say, keep them in mind as I'm going about my life. As they say nowadays, you hear or see people writing about yoga, and they're recognizing, well, there's the practice of asanas, but there's what I've read a few call yoga off the mat. So the mat means the mat, the cushion on which you practice asanas, sitting, standing, lying down, stretching. Okay, that's yoga asana, but what about the rest of my life? Oh, that's yoga off the mat. So we might want to say also this is yoga off the mat.
Now I know why this book was so mind-blowing for me. Yes. So thank you very much for this gift. We have next book. We must be
next book.
There is a lot of books. There was also one interesting question by one devotee. How you manage, because in one side you are renounced like monk life, and on the other side you are very involved in this scientific field. How you balance this? Because a lot of devotees asking about balance.
Balance, yes.
Yes.
Well, okay, if we take the idea of balance, I like to give the example of riding a bicycle. Most people know how to ride a bicycle, but when you first were learning how to ride a bicycle as a small child, it was quite a challenge, right? And it was almost unimaginable. How am I going to sit on this small seat? And there's two wheels, but they're very narrow wheels. And they're like this. Maybe we had, when we were very small, a bicycle with trainer wheels, right? Two additional little wheels on the back. So you could very easily ride, because it actually had four wheels. But then at some point, Dad took off the trainer wheels and said, okay, today we're going to learn how to ride bicycle with two wheels. And okay, and then he took you and sort of ran alongside of you, right, pushing. And then at one point, I think this is universal, at one point he gives you a strong push, and you're like this, and you realize you're doing it, you're on your own, and pretty soon after that, you fall over. Right?
Yes.
But after a while, you try a few times, and after a while, you find you can do it without even thinking about it. But imagine now, instead of riding a bicycle, you're sitting on the bicycle completely still, And you're supposed to balance. Is that going to be very easy? Maybe some people can do it, but most of us would find that very difficult. So what makes it easy is that we are moving. We're moving, plus our body has learned how to adjust the weight. We're actually making a lot of unconscious shifts in our body as we're going. But it's quite easy because we're moving. So I think spiritual balance is vaguely like that. We need to get going. We need to say, okay, I'll just do it. And then over time, with some practice, yes, there's these various duties I have in my life, which we may want to call material duties, but I also have my spiritual duties, and let me just see if there's some way I can balance them by doing them. And if there's a determination, again, I want to, this is important and this is also important, okay, then with a little help, that was a Beatles song, I think, I get by with a little help from my friends.
I don't know.
Okay, that's before your time.
Yes.
There was a song. I think it was Beatles. I get by, I manage life. I get by with a little help from my friends. So like that, I manage with a little help from my friends, and especially my inner friend. We understand from Bhagavad Gita and from our bhakti literature that we all have one very good friend in our with us, in ourselves, we say in the heart, and that is the Lord, technically called Paramatma, the higher self, the supreme self. And as we are conscious, he is conscious, he's helping out. Yeah, so it's a matter of practice. As far as how do I balance academic life and devotional life, first of all, I'm not a teacher in a university. I have done some university teaching, but not now. So I don't have that kind of pressure. The academic world for the teacher, professor is, it can be quite intense pressures to, perform. I don't have any of that. I'm sort of, you could say, retired. So my academic work is essentially writing, and you could say it's essentially volunteer work. And as such, I can do very much what I want to do. I can focus on the subjects that I'm interested in, especially. Again, which is different in some respects from, say, a junior professor in the university may have to teach courses on subjects they're not so into, but I don't have that problem. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Now we have book with headline Bhagavata Smaranam. Is it right pronounced?
Yes, Bhagavata Smaranam.
Smaranam. Devotees' reflection on the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1. Canto 1.
Canto 1.
Yes.
Yes, that's, canto means, that's a Latin word, I guess, the first part of a book. A Sanskrit book, the Bhagavatam, or Srimad Bhagavatam, or Srimad Bhagavata Purana. And the word smarana means remembering. And this is a book which I've simply edited, which means I've invited others to write. And this is something I like to do, is to encourage others to write. And specifically, I like to encourage them to write based on inspiration that they have gathered from their reading of devotional literature. In this case, this book, the Bhagavatam, which is a very, very important book for our specific tradition, the Vaishnava tradition of bhakti. So this is a collection of such inspirations by those who we managed to get to do the writing. It's not always easy to get people to write because often they think, I cannot write. That's a kind of challenge for people to overcome, thinking, I cannot write. They can read. If you can read, you can write. Yeah.
You mentioned Bhagavata Purana, and His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami recorded a documentary about Bhagavata Purana. We will share the link below. It is on YouTube. What influenced you or motivated you for this documentary?
We were several years ago, this was 2016, myself and my colleague Ravi Gupta, Professor Ravi Gupta, also known amongst devotees as His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu. We're organizing a conference, an academic conference on the Bhagavata Purana in South India, in the city of Chennai. And I just thought, well, we're going to have several very respected scholars attending and giving presentations on the Bhagavatam, so why don't we take advantage of their all coming into one place and interview them? And so that led to the creation of this film. Yeah. We sort of took up as a general concept how to do it. There are many documentaries produced, for example, by BBC, where there's one sort of host who is on some sort of quest. He wants to, or she wants to find out something in particular. And so they travel here, they go there, they speak to this person, that person. It's all very intriguing and exciting. So we thought maybe we can do the same with the Bhagavatam, but we need to have some key question to ask. What we're searching for, what is it we want to find out? So we decided what we want to find out is, why is it that this Bhagavatam, which is centuries old, if not millennia, the tradition says it's 5,000 years old, but whatever its age, why is it that it's now, today, in the 21st century, still popular? How many people write a book that is still popular after 3 years? Or 5 years, or 20 years, you know. And here's a book which is popular after hundreds of years, and maybe thousands of years. Why? So we made that our quest question.
Wow, so powerful. You will get the link below, so all invited to watch. Okay, let's...
More books?
Yes, we have more.
It's a very persistent interviewer. Okay.
Yeah. Next is Krishna-ksetra, the theology of deity worship in Chaitanya Vaishnavism. This look like that.
Yes. So you want to know what is this book?
Yes.
This was my master's thesis. I studied at, I did my master's degree at a particular institution in Northern California near San Francisco called the Graduate Theological Union, which is a consortium of several religious seminaries, mainly Christian seminaries, but with a program, a course program in the academic study of religion, you could say secular study of religion. So I took that course. And it was required that we write a thesis. So my thesis was this book. My purpose, my intention, I thought, not just to, get this degree and then forget about it, but to make it so that it would be interesting, that it would be a book which explains the reasoning of the practice of, well, in a sense, going back to this first book you showed, Krishna's Wonderful Form, but in perhaps a bit more academic way, to explain the reasoning of this practice. Or you can say, taking this practice of worshipping the Murti, the form of Krishna in the temple, and making that the lens through which to explain all the whole theology, the whole logic of bhakti yoga, of devotion to Krishna. One could instead take another lens. One could take the practice of chanting or reciting the names of Krishna, which is very important also in the tradition. One could take it from the lens of visiting the sacred places. Like that, there's many different ways. But I thought, let's take this as the lens, this practice of Krishna Seva, and explain the theology through it. So it's a small book, and we have a Spanish translation of it. Yeah. And we had a German translation. I think it went out of print. And Croatian, we had a Croatian also. Or have, maybe we still have. Yeah.
So you can get it in more languages. Yes, you mentioned Bhakti Yoga, and if I can go a little back about this documentary and this book, famous book, which is here decades, even more, like you say. Why you think so that is so powerful?
Why is Bhakti Yoga so powerful?
The book, Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, the Bhagavad Gita. Why is it so powerful? It's Krishna himself. He's speaking. This is the understanding of our tradition, that if we allow ourselves to take the words of Krishna as having been literally spoken by Krishna as having been literally present in the world and having in some time of ancient history spoken to a real person named Arjuna. And if we take it as having been somehow or other recorded by Vyasadeva, then it can have a strong impact because Krishna is speaking not only to Arjuna, but he's speaking to all of us. It's also powerful because he's addressing fundamental problems. He's addressing the essential problem of our lives. We find ourselves in a situation of, on the one side, wanting to be happy, wanting to enjoy life, wanting to have permanent relationships with others, and realizing that it's not possible to find permanent happiness because our very existence in these physical material bodies is not permanent. And we become aware that we live in extreme constraints. Our freedom is extremely limited, and it becomes increasingly limited as we get older. Our powers of memory, of physical movement, everything becomes reduced. So we experience old age, and we become feeble. So Krishna is addressing all of that and saying, well, this is a problem, and here's how to fix it. And he's giving a quite practical process also. It's yoga. The word yoga can have the sense of practice, and it's sometimes contrasted with the philosophical tradition called Sankhya, which is more analytical. But the Bhagavad Gita is very much combining not only Sankhya and yoga, but also Vedanta. But it's in the end, it's a practical book. And tying that back to Krishna Seva, when Krishna says, offer me a fruit, offer me a flower, offer me some water, offer me just a leaf of a tree. If you do that, and you do it with a spirit of devotion, of submission, I'll accept it. I'll accept that offering. So that's indicating that one can make an immediate relationship with the Lord just by making a simple gesture with a devotional attitude. So like that, and then Krishna expands on that. He says, whatever you do, you can engage that in such a way that it becomes, as we would say, spiritualized. But when Krishna says whatever, it's not exactly whatever. It's whatever you learn with some guidance from a teacher of Bhakti Yoga. Otherwise, people will think, okay, so I can take my drugs, my intoxication, and I can offer that to God. That'll be good. No, not really.
You mentioned that if someone offers a leaf of water, that Krishna accepts. What that exactly means, that he accepts?
Just like if I offer you a watermelon. I hand it to you. You accept. You say, "Oh, thank you." So, as I said, in the practice of Krishna Seva, the murti or image in the temple, we make an offering, we place it on a nice plate, and we bring before the deity, and we remember from what we understand about how Krishna is all-powerful, that he can be fully present in that form, that he can actually see, in this case, watermelon, which we might want to cut nicely, so we don't just leave the big melon there for him. We prepare it in nice pieces. Maybe we take out the seeds. And we remember that Krishna can not only see, but that because he is sentient, in fact, he is the source of our sentience, his senses are powerful in many ways, and one of them is that through his seeing, he can also taste. And we can sort of understand that with ourselves. If I give you watermelon, now I give you a watermelon slice, you see the watermelon, but you can also remember the taste because you've had watermelon before. But with Krishna, we understand his body, his form. Unlike ours, each of the senses of his form can perform all the functions of all the other senses. And so when we offer, Krishna says, he gives a condition for accepting. He says, I will accept it, your offering, when it is offered with devotion. So then the next question is, well, how do we measure that, whether I have devotion or not? And what is that thing called devotion? Well, that's what the whole Bhagavad Gita is about, to understand, to get a sense of what it would mean to have a spirit of devotion to the Lord. But essentially, we already know what that is when we feel some kind of eagerness to please another person. What is that feeling of having an eagerness to please some other person? We bring, as small children, maybe we bring an apple to give to our teacher in the school. We want to please the teacher. So it's all it's not something outside our experience, but it's something that we can learn to focus, to be efficacious for our spiritual development.
So amazing. We have next book, the last one.
Last book, okay. No, there's one more here.
Is there? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, last two.
Okay.
The first one is Gaura. This is the
Smaranam.
Smarana.
Yeah. Same, we had Bhagavata Smaranam, and this is Gaura Smarana. Same thing. Smarana means remembering. And Gaura, in this case, is referring to Sri Chaitanya. Mm-hmm. And in our particular strand of Vaishnava culture, of bhakti, we are especially keen to engage in the practice of bhakti as guided by the person Gaura, who is known as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who was he's what we might want to call a pre-modern historical figure. He's from the 16th century. And there's an extensive biography, a sacred biography about him and his life. I like to say he was the ideal reader of the Bhagavata, the Srimad Bhagavatam. He lived the Bhagavatam, and at the same time we understand him to be a avatar, but not exactly avatar, but the form of Krishna himself as a devotee of Krishna. It gets a little complicated. So there are many stories, we wouldn't say just stories, but history of his life. And what we did in this book, again, like the Bhagavata Smarana, is encourage readers of that history to write their own inspirations about Gauranga, also he's called. So that's what that is, a collection of short writings.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, and now we have the last one here.
Yeah, the last one here, the last one for today.
For today. And this is attending Krishna's image, Chaitanya Vaishnava Murti Seva as devotional truth.
That was a mouthful. Yes. So that was a book that grew out of, or as a revised version of, my doctoral dissertation. As I mentioned, this small book, Krishna Seva, that was my master's thesis. When I finished that, I went to Oxford University. I was able to be inducted in Oxford University. And there I was encouraged to continue the subject of the worship of and the service to the image of Krishna in the temple. I had other ideas, but my advisor at the time said, no, stay with what you know something, continue. So that's what I did. So this was a more extensive research, and I would say in some ways deeper than the other work. And it has an ethnographic component, especially in chapter 2, which is, I focused on one particular temple in chapter 2 in Vrindavan, where they've been doing this practice of Krishna Seva for the last 400 and by now 60, 70, 80 years, a long time. More than 4 centuries, close to 5 centuries. They've been doing nonstop, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year.
The Radharaman temple.
The Radharaman temple. So I went there, I studied, I listened to the pujaris there. I got some of their literature. I got something translated that they had written, and interviewed them and got some ideas of how to develop a comparison. This book is, it's a kind of comparison between this temple and one other temple, which is not in India. It's in England. It's outside of London. It's a place called Bhaktivedanta Manor, where they've been performing similar worship, not for almost 500 years, but for, let's see, from 1973, 50 years, since half a century. again, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, nonstop. And that's starting at 4:30 in the morning, actually before they wake up the deity, so from 4 in the morning until, I don't know, 9 something at night every day, nonstop. They're doing this practice. So this is a kind of comparison. I thought, well, what sort of how can we understand this practice with a little bit of more fine-tuning, like if we can sharpen the lens, how can we get a deeper understanding of what's going on? So that's what I tried to do. So I include some history, some explanation of the literature that is kind of behind all of this. Some of the earlier history, some of the 19th century history, which leads, how did it happen that all of this even came to the West? Well, that's the third chapter. How is the reasoning that made it possible to bring this, all of this, into a context of where Abrahamic traditions, especially Judaism and more especially Christianity, have prevailed for so many centuries, and suddenly you drop a Vaishnava temple into the middle of that. What's going on? How is that working? That's explained in this book.
This is something I really must read.
Yes, maybe if you read this book, it'll give you ideas for your next book.
Yeah, that will be great. Okay, now I think we finish with books, but I have a question from one person. Just to find it. How can we be sure that we are making right decision, although might look externally wrong or others don't agree with that?
That is a very broad sort of question and a bit abstract without knowing what's the context of the question. But I would just say generally, from the perspective of our tradition, we have a sort of three-prong approach to making decisions, what to do, what not to do. And that is, first we have what we call Shastra, that is the sacred literature, such as the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavata Purana, and there are others. So that's we take as a kind of foundation because they give lots of guidance for living. And then we have Guru. The Guru is one who is very competent, very knowledgeable of this literature. And so the Guru can say, well, in this circumstance, what would be important to consider, taking into account what it says in this literature. What I see as important is X, Y, and Z. You should do like this and not do like that. And then the third sort of cornerstone is what is called sadhu. Guru is our personal teacher. Sadhu they may be associates of the Guru. They are also practitioners of the tradition. They're also knowledgeable of the foundational texts, the Shastra, the literature. And as practitioners who are living, sadhu generally means is living in a serious way, the practice, and is living a rather austere way, and so they have very focused understanding. So sadhu, shastra, guru, vakya, the words of these three, we try to bring them all together into a clear understanding for ourselves. So there's these three, but there's a fourth, and that's ourself. And so we get all guidance, and then we have ourself to take responsibility for making a decision for our own lives. Not that I just listen to what everyone says and I just do what they say without thinking and don't take any responsibility. But rather I take into account all of this guidance, and I take it seriously and I follow it, but I follow it on my own understanding, my own reflection, my own responsibility. That's the basic way we understand. And that works pretty well. It's always challenging because new circumstances come and we think, well, it doesn't say anything about this in the ancient literature, and it doesn't say anything about that. And, okay, that's why we have contemporary practitioners to consult.
Thank you so much for all you share.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I always ask for final thought.
Final thoughts.
Final thoughts, yes.
The final thought is we're all on a big, long spiritual journey, and it's an adventure. Mm-hmm. And something that my guru, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, always emphasized was how particularly fortunate we are just being in these human bodies. So if we can take full advantage of, he would say, this human form of life. This human form of life is rarely achieved. That's something we don't appreciate, but if you think about it, you look around, there's so many different forms of life. And it's a rare thing, statistically, to have a human form. And it's the human form that is particularly equipped to understand and practice and realize spiritual knowledge so that we can actually make a permanent solution to material existence.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And everyone who want to order the book, you can just write and we will let you know how. And see you next time.
Yes. Next time we can show other books.
Yes. Maybe another 10, 20.
All right.
Okay. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.